Okay, groups. So what we did, we counted, we brought the wheat back, and I should explain to you, here in southern Illinois, these are the two wheats that we have. And we pulled this from another field. So we have non-bearded wheat, and then you have bearded wheat. The difference between this, those guys that are gonna push the yield up a little bit, they're gonna go after this bearded wheat. And the reason for this, because this is gonna be the flowering stage, or the flowering part on this. So these anthers, that's what's gonna collect that pollen, and then it has a better, the bearded wheat has a better pollination rate versus this non-bearded wheat. Where we're gonna see this non-bearded wheat at is these guys that bale this up for straw. So especially the small square bales, because this stuff, after you get down in the field with this, you're better off rolling a thing of pink insulation, because you're itchy after this. Like I said, this one, it's not as dusty and it's not as itchy, but you still have the, like I said, the disadvantages of being behind a baler too. Whoever built that should be in jail. So maybe that was the difference, and you can see the differences in the head sizes. So your bearded wheat obviously looks a little bit bigger, but like I said, you're gonna have this roughly about the same counts of kernel. So whenever you're counting your kernels, and it doesn't matter bearded wheat or non-bearded wheat, you need to be somewhere, and I forgot what the number was. You need to be somewhere between that 18 to 26, if I remember right, on the kernel, on the number of kernels per head. So sometimes you might get down into the 15s, and then sometimes you might get all the way up into the 30s. It's the same way on, when you're looking at corn. So sometimes you're gonna have a big corn ear, sometimes you're gonna have a small corn ear. But wheat's gonna be a little bit variance with that. So when we talked about the 72 bushel average per acre, what Illinois is going to have, and then you start looking at the corn yields that USDA predicts and the soybean yields, the wheat yield is so, and skewed's not the best word to use for this, but you're going to be over in the Clinton County area, the Washington County area, where they can get easily the over 100 bushel per acre. But then you get some acres that may not be well drained, or maybe higher clay soils, and they could jump down all the way to 50. So whenever you're looking between that 50 to 100, you're having a 50 bushel difference on a farm average, versus if you go to your average corn and soybean, those numbers are going to be a whole lot closer together. So wheat is just one of these bears to really predict what that yield's going to be, because you're messing with such small kernels on this. So whenever you start counting the kernels, let's get to your kernel count, because remember what we're talking about with this equation right here. So with this equation right here, then that 5 foot that we just looked at, we got 105 heads in that 5 foot. Our kernel average is going to be 19, is what our kernel average was going to. I pulled 5 heads off. The first one I got 11. I'm sitting here looking at my notes. The first one I got 11. The second one I got 26. We got a 16, a 24, and a 20. So you take those 5 numbers, add them all up together, and divide by 5. That's where we got the 19.4. So we'll just use the 19 on it, because what we're not calculating on this is we're not calculating our head loss. So whenever we combine it, these things are so small that it bounces off the reel, or what's being blown out the back too. So you gotta tighten up your screens and your sieves on this. So the easiest way to get this wheat off this head is to rub it between your hands. And since this is still kind of in that milk stage, you might have to peel it off a little bit. But this is what you're kind of looking at. And here probably next week or a week and a half from now, this stuff is going to start turning. You'll be able to blow that shaft off pretty easily. But what you're looking for on these kernels, if we can get up here closer. See if you can't find one. You're looking for something that looks just like that. So that's going to be your wheat kernel. It's still developing, and we'll get into this test weight here in just a minute. Let me rip one open here, but what you're going to see, if they can see that, when you squeeze this, see how that milk's coming out of it? So we're in that milk stage. You can see that dough is starting to form. So that's where we're going to say that we're going to be somewhere in that stage 10, 10.5, 10.6, maybe 10.8. But what we'll do is we'll post the stages on Blackboard as well. So I'll have there's going to be a PowerPoint that's going to be called growth stages, and we looked at that in crops class. That has corn, wheat, and beans on the growth stages, and we'll go ahead and post that each week. We'll have that way you don't have to go search for it. It's going to be there. But this one, scroll down to the, I think it's the last about 3 or 4 slides on that PowerPoint. That's where you'll see what your different growth stages, and it kind of talks about where your different milk stages, in your dough stage. Those that cut the wheat leach off of this, they'll be chopping. Have they started chopping in? So these guys that got the wheat in early, they'll be chopping. This stuff will be chopped here probably, if we were to do wheat leach, it'd be chopped next week. Let it get a little bit more doughier, because like I said, this milk stage, it'll be dripping out of the back of the silage wagons. You can follow it down the road. But the hay leach or wheat leach is getting real close to being harvested, and then after you get the wheat leach out, your harvesting is, we're probably about a week and a half, 2 weeks behind that chopper on it. So those are some things that you want to look at as you go along and start scouting your wheat. So other things, if you can jump in with an agronomist, diseases that you want to look at crown and root rot, especially this year with it being as wet as what it has been. These are going to be your diseases. You got leaf rust and that tan rust. So that tan rust is going to be what we looked at out here. It's going to have some blight mixed in with it. And then you have your Fusarium and Mosaic, which that Fusarium is going to be your scab. So scab is, I don't think we pulled, so this will be a little bit of scab that you'll be looking at. So that's going to affect that kernel test weight is what that will be affecting. Your fungus, you got your rust in there as well, you got smut, and then you got your powdery mildew. So that powdery mildew and the tan spot may look pretty similar together, and I'm not real good at the disease. I just know if your wheat's going to be stressed, you're going to be dropping test weight pretty quick on it. So let's talk about test weight here real quick. So if the average on our, we did the calculations. Let's back up here. We did the calculations on here. So we had the heads per 5 foot was 105. All right, we're going to times that out by our kernel per head, which is 19, divided out by our row spacing. Row spacing here was 9. So if we take 105, times it by 19, divided by 9, and then times it out by 0.48, that's going to get us to that, in that 5 foot area, we got a 106 yield check on that. So that's pretty high for it. But what we're not counting onto this is we're not, at the end of the day, where our yield check is going to be, our yield is going to be what's going to end up in the hopper. So we have a long, we got about 3 weeks left to go. So we got bird damage that's going to be mixed in with it. God forbid if we had a hailstorm that came through on this. So there, it's got a little bit of Mother Nature that has left to go before this is ripened. So you want to knock that down. I would say probably knock 10% off that. That's a pretty heavy number, but that's going to get you more close to where we're going to be looking at. The next area that we went to, we got a 102 check on it, and then the last one I checked was in a little bit lower area. We got a 75. So when we start looking at all this, I'm going to guess that this is going to probably check out once we take that percentage off the top of it. We're probably looking at around that last number there, around that 75 for a yield that's going to be coming off this field, which I'll be happy with that 75 with it. So with that being said, I don't think we're missing much. I should say this was sown at a 2 bushel per acre, so that gives you a little bit of and that we did that earlier for the crops class, and we might post that on there as well. That way you can kind of go back and review that. But this was sown at 2 bushel per acre, and the count on it, I forget what it was. I have to go back and look at the notes, but we'll post it on there. So you might have a couple videos for wheat to look at. So look at, and that would have been back in that when we first, what was that, March? That first week of March, we went out here and we did a stand count on the roots and the tiller roots. So we made a long ways from that March to this May time frame. So anyhow, we'll get that, and like I said, we'll have a few questions. Especially the main thing to get out of this, guys and gals, will be this equation right here. That's what's going to help you out, and you want to do this on a couple of different places in this field. So small fields, do it at least 3 times to get your average on that. Just as a quick note, some weed problem that you'll have in with this. So you're going to have some foxtail issues with it. We got some cheat that's going to be mixed in with that. Ryegrass is a big one. So if which we're not growing this for seed, But if we are growing this for seed and we see some ryegrass out mixed in with it, the elevators are like Hoffman Seed and etc. They'll take up to 5% of ryegrass mixing with it. Anything over 5%, they'll reject it because it's just hard to clean that ryegrass out of the wheat seed. So that'll be the conclusion for the wheat yield check. But just remember this equation right here on it.